Hi, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Everybody doing good? How's everything treating you guys out here? Really good? So I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you here, and thank you guys for coming around to the tent. It means a lot to us. If you haven't come up to see us, please do. It's great to, not only for us vendors, just to see you and talk to you, and it's good also for us to see where we want to go in the future and what you guys can, offer us to you guys are looking for. So we generally try to, talk with everybody and see what we can do. And so today I'm going to go over, some of our releases over the last year, and we'll just jump right into it. So we had the 676, the all-sky camera. This has really come out good. It's really a low-light Starvis 2, no amp glow. These have been really, really good for the wide field cameras or lunar impacts, that kind of thing, meteor detection. These have been really great cameras for that. So that was a nice upgrade this year. We also had the 4400 MC Pro. So these cameras are great for bigger SCTs, that full frame, 44 megapixel camera. Again, efficient cooling, anti-dew system in it. These are some good full frame camera for, like I said, those bigger telescopes for us. So we also got smart cameras. So these have been coming out really pretty strong lately. So we came out with the 2600 MC Air, and I really love that camera. That camera it travels well. We get rid of cables. It integrates the ASI Air into it. It's been a wonderful product. I've changed most of my stuff to these kind of cameras because it just works much better. It's an easier platform to work with. Then we released the 585 MC Air and MM Air this year. So that was, we'll go into that. So again, a lot of, we can do 4K. It's got the Starvis 2, very high signal noise ratio, that kind of thing. It's been, it's a really well-known camera. Everybody was really happy with this camera. So this is a great addition. Again, it's a smaller profile, so it fits a lot more scopes. So this is good for SCTs all the way down to small refractors. It's kind of like that good all-around kind of camera. So then we got into some accessories and stuff. We did the filter wheels. We redid those. So what we did is we created them for less light leak. There was, our older panels were just flush, so now we've created some edges and some other things to create the light leaks. We have some little pads that go there that will press up against the off-axis guider for this one, so that helps block out the light. We upgraded the motors, so the time it goes around, or there's less chance for freeze up or hang up. So you can actually run these with. So in our old filter design, if you did not put them, balance that drawer out, it would give you problems. So it would try to turn, but you had too much on one side, it wouldn't find the filter right. So we've corrected that. We got a little stronger of a motor, so now we don't have that issue anymore. But yeah, she's a great performance, and I don't know if you can see it here, but everything is recessed over the edge, so everything will cut out the light for any kind of incoming light. If you got street lights or anything else off to the side, it won't impact your imaging.
You have a question in the back.
Oh, question? Sure.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment. I'm glad you did that because I have a 6200 camera and filter, and I always just get light leaks. So what I did for anyone else who has the same problem is grab a piece of cloth and an elastic takes care of the problem.
Right. Yeah, and then we also went to the USB-C design on the front too. So that helps integrate, as we move forward. We'll start seeing more of the USB-Cs going forward. Our EAF Pro and our regular new EAF, EAF-N, And so the difference between these, the EAF Pro has Bluetooth. The EAFN does not. And then the EAF Pro also has the in and out buttons on the focuser. Now, I prefer the in and out on the focuser because you can be out at your camera, and sometimes if you guys run with ASI Air and you're kind of trying to find your focus, it can take a long time hitting that button just to get close to your focus range. You can take a guess with numbers, but sometimes, you know, it's just a little bit longer. So now you can kind of just go out there, hit that a few times, you're right there. So it's a much better rough focus. You wouldn't want to use it if you were trying to dial in something for like a planet or something like that. You'd be hitting the, you know, your objective too much. So you don't really want to do that.
I got a question about
Sure.
the focusers. The old, excuse me, the old one, you can't turn the focuser while the motor's hooked to it.
Yep.
What about these new ones?
It's the same way. Yep. There is some designs out there where you can get a clutch and it'll clutch in and out. Yeah, it's a third-party product.
I was looking at some of these things that have a belt drive that goes on your focuser, and then they have a holder that goes on
Yep.
the
Yep.
actual focusing.
Yeah, that's another third party, but yeah, we match well, and a lot of times what we'll do is we'll get them out there and then we'll let the third parties take over all the little nuts and bolts and dew shields and little things, these little gizmos that everybody likes to grab.
You
And
guys have a little button on there, you just push the button, and then you do the raw focusing on the thing and let the button re-engage.
yeah, we'll, yeah, no, we love ideas, and I don't know if any of you guys know, you know, if you've used our products, we're very attentive to what the customers say to us. So we go out there, we do updates all the time, we improve our product a lot over the, you know, over the course of short periods of time. We'll make many leaps and bounds to improve your astro imaging throughout the night. So, but you know, so we love those kind of comments. And if you got more, please send them into our desk because we love to hear them. We pass them right on to the developers, and that's why you see a lot of the stuff you see is from people like you. So.
What do we send the suggestions into?
The technical support desk. So if you go on our website, you'll see it in support. Just send, hey, I got a suggestion. We get them all the time. And so the good ones make it around. And like I said, I take it right to the developers. And if they, you know, if there's something that, you know, like, oh, yeah, we can do that. I've seen them turn it around literally in one cycle. So like from one build to the next build, they'll have that improve it. So please send them in if you've got them, for sure.
What's the difference between the new flame focuser and the old one?
Yeah, the motor is, yeah. So there is a little better of a motor, and there is some difference between the old and new. If you're trying to match the old and new couplers to the focuser, the little silver coupler that goes onto the shaft of the focuser, that is a little bit different. So you will need to take that into account. You'll have to change the coupler around. But they come with the focuser, so it's not a big deal. But if you're trying to just take one off of your old rig and slide the other one on, you'll run into that. Because it is slightly larger, so you need to change it out for that one. Again, yeah, we upgraded USB-C, precision, which we just talked about, and then it does holds a better load, high capacity. We also came out with the F30 APO guide camera, or guide scope, sorry. If you guys remember the old one, the helical focuser on that was something that was a joy to work with. So we completely redesigned it, and I'll tell you, this focus is much better. It's an APO design. It's got a much sharper, clear stars on it, and that focuser works. Again, sure, absolutely.
And the guiding and focusing, automatic focus works better with that APO because the stars are sharper.
You know, it really, that's, you know.
Repeat the question so they can hear.
So you want to repeat?
The the sharper the optics, the easier it is for the software to keep the star in focus. And when you have scintillation and you got a blobby star, it makes guiding more erratic. So this
Yeah.
helps tighten it up a little bit. And
Yeah,
improve
you can still guide out of focus, but yeah, the better precision will help. Yes.
Yeah.
And the 174 is still your biggest chip, biggest pixel size?
For the guider, yeah, for a mini guide cam, yeah, that would go into a say OAG. Yeah,
You wouldn't use that with this?
you could.
You could.
Yep, sure you could.
And you could use a regular uncooled camera as well, right?
Yep, yep.
You use the
224. Yeah, there's endless combinations. It's really just
I love the 174.
yeah.
For some reason, you never.
Generally, mono would work better for your guiding though. So if it's a color camera.
But, it's worth the money.
And then just recently we came out with the AM7. Now everybody, we've been waiting to get this one out for a while. A little increased payload, so we can actually get some of these bigger SCTs up in the air. So staying with our same AM5 and AM3 that were both really popular. It's the same kind of mount. It actually fits in the AM5 box I found, because they shipped me a unit without a box or anything else. I had one of the tester units. And on my way here, I'm like, I'm going to have to figure how we're going to put this in. It actually fit in the AM5 box, so that gives you any idea. It's a little denser though. It has got some weight to it, but we definitely increased the encoders on it. They got some bigger. We got a 20 kilogram with that's about 45 pounds with no counterweight, and then about 30 kilograms with a counterweight, which is about 67 pounds roughly. So definitely can get some of those bigger units up there. What else? It does has the power in the saddle, so you can freewheel if you like. Usually you can tidy up all your cables and get them away so that you can run it, if it all the way around if you had to. You won't get any cable snags.
What does the N stand for?
New. How about that?
What else does it
It was the new unit. Yeah.
also do?
Yeah, the EAF.
Oh.
New. Yes. Yeah. It took some time to get that one right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. C-Star 30 Pro. We got a few out here. I've had great reports from those that have used it. They've been really happy. So I'm really happy that we're starting to get these out now. Originally, we had some issues where the first generation wasn't delivering what we liked, and so we held it, and that's kind of why you saw some delays with the 30 Pro coming out. Ended up being a lens issue, and we got that corrected, and now we can actually get these star trail images like you see here, or Milky Way shots. Those have now really started to take off, and we've had some really great results with what has come out. Basically, the C-Stars, all in one device, right? We took the mount, the telescope, the filter wheel, the focuser, the ASI controller, the camera, and the power supply, and put it all in that tiny little box that everybody seems to love. And the rest is history with those things. I'll tell you, everybody, if you haven't used one or want to know more about one, come see me or talk to, someone that has one, because everybody will tell you they're some of the best telescopes that they've used for years, and that so happy that they bought one, and that, I can now get back into imaging. I can put my little scope out, and so definitely please come see us, or ask someone about what they're about. Again, we take it's 4K, and you can actually up to 8K sample with these, which we've now done. Yep, down here, and then yeah, there's your Milky Way scenes, and then you got solar system scenery, just the same as the other C-Stars. Uses the same platform, of course, which is usually pretty bulletproof. So future plans. So we'll go into a little bit like cameras. So we'll probably see a lot more smart cameras. You'll see, because sensors, there's only so many sensors out there, right? You know, we know what they are, the Panasonics, the Sonys, and we know what works and what doesn't work. So until they come out with something new, fantastic that we can use, you know, we're stuck with whatever we got, and, or, you know, make upgrades to our cooling systems. We'll do some other things. So you'll probably see more smart cameras with the ASIRs built in. You'll probably see some more of those coming out very soon. Mounts, you're gonna probably see even larger now. So you know, we got the AM7, right? Well, AM7's great for some things, but it's not that observatory grade mount that, you know, we really want. Some of us serious imagers really want, you know, different things like a pass through the cable so we can do some things. There are connections in the base, or, you know, there's lots of different things we can do to change these things up for observatories. GPS location in it. You know, there's just a lot of different things we can add. So you'll probably see like an AM10 roughly, so about 100-pound capacity, and a lot of new features is what we're looking at. So that's in our design books right now. C-Star, here's the popular one, right? Everybody's been waiting to hear about what's going on with the C-Star. So, you know, we got the S50, the S30 Pro just came out. We are working on the S50 Pro. That should, you know, we're looking at sometime soon for that. What's that?
What does that mean?
What does that mean? I can't give you a date. I let the owner do that. But it is in the plans. It's coming out soon. I would say, you know, you might see it within the next 6 months probably. At least announced.
Okay, so will the only difference between the S30 and Pro and the S50 Pro is the size of the aperture?
Yes. And so what might happen on the 50 Pro, they might not have it will be more of a deep sky camera and not the wide field camera. We'll leave that with a 30, that kind of thing. But other than that, we'll see what else comes into it, but that's being developed right now. And then everybody else wants, you know, I've heard we gotta have a 70, an 80, something, we know it. Everybody's got an opinion what it's gonna be. Well, I've heard anything from a 70 to an 80 to a 100. And actually, I've actually heard that we might actually be into the 100 might be come up. So, see?
Bigger is better.
Yeah, that's right.
Sky,
Yes, that's right, SUV.
come up with a 70 to 100, it's gonna be one of your best sellers.
Yep. And so probably with that, we'll also be going right to a Pro. We're not going to go probably with a lower model sensor. We're going to probably put like a 2600 or something like that. But that will also drive up the price. So, you know, it'll be a trade-off, and we'll see where we get with it. But that's kind of where we're leaning, kind of how we're going, where we're going with that. So you will see them, but you'll probably see 50, and then probably, I don't know, and then we'll make the decision whether it's an 80 or a 100 or whatever it's going to be, but you'll probably see those over the next year.
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I said that. Yeah, so that's all I had for today, but I'll take care of any questions you guys have. If you guys have any questions for me or anything else, I got, sure.
On the S50,
Yeah,
you stitch together several images actually in the software of the
yeah,
camera.
like a mosaic,
Yeah, mosaic. But the ASIR doesn't have that feature yet.
right.
And that would be nice if you could put it in there since you've already got the software written.
Yep, yeah, we talked earlier, so yeah, I'll take that back.
You talked to my buddy.
Oh, I talked to your buddy, okay. That same thing came across, so yeah, we'll definitely, it made my book, and we'll definitely talk about it down the road.
We've been experimenting with mosaics over the last few times we've gone out, and because we can get a lot of resolution out of the smaller image, and then you can get a whole wide angle view by putting them together, and you still get your really good resolution.
Yep.
So I like mosaics.
Yeah. So the great thing is Steve right here.
Good lead in.
You were the absolute perfect lead-in. Thank you
Not a
again.
plant. Not a plant. Yeah.
Because Steve here is going to do a talk about mosaics and how it
little
helps
bit,
and
yeah.
with PixInsight,
Astropixel processor. Yeah.
Right.
So we have one in the back still. What's it?
Yeah, just a
Yep.
technical question.
Okay.
I have a 6200 which works great.
Yep.
And works flawlessly in New England where I have an observatory. Down here, works most of the time, occasionally fails connection. And I tried changing cables, works, then doesn't work. I thought maybe it's just the moisture, so I've heated it, and then it seems to work. Is that a technical problem? Is it the moisture in the air here?
What are you warming up? What are you warming up? What are you warming? You said you.
Hand dryer.
Yeah. To what part?
What hardware?
What?
The connection.
It might be a hardware issue, like a hardware issue on the connector, maybe.
A loose pin or
A loose.
something?
It could be a cold solder joint, maybe.
Okay.
Um,
So should I send it back if there's a problem?
Yeah.
If it's not happening?
yeah.
What do you think I should do?
Well, you could definitely try to isolate it more, and then if you do have issues, just reach out to our tech support.
Would that be repairable?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Absolutely. We sell the boards. We also sell. Most people don't know, but if you have a problem with your camera and it's out of warranty and whatnot, or you rip the cable out walking past it by accident, knocked it over, you can reach out to us. We do sell the parts. So if you needed a main board, we can send you a main board. We can send you the purchase link, and you got.
I mean, I built my own telescopes, I can do that.
Right.
So if you send them a board, I can replace it.
Yep.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. And if you reach out to us, and then you get a year warranty on any parts that are replaced.
Oh, he has a question over there first.
Yep.
Yeah, any future talk about, I've got a couple of the ASR Plus 256, the current models. We would love to see, 6 or 8 USB ports possibly on
Yeah.
maybe an AMD class processor that could, live stack at a more commonly based faster I/O. Either in the direction of possibly having an ASIA or software release where you could roll it into your own, or possibly selling a more higher end hardware.
So on the ASIA, I haven't heard any direct plans recently. I know we have kicked around an observatory, kind of like like the AM10 or whatever that we might come out with. Something that's a little more observatory grade. It gives you more ports, more that kind of thing. So I know it's been discussed. It might make its way out, but I haven't heard anything that's that's concrete or hitting the floor right yet.
All right.
Yeah, but I'll bring it back that you're that's something that's brought up.
They have on the back.
Yeah.
Quick question, the camera rotator,
Yes.
is there the firmware update to prevent over-rotation?
Yes, there was a 180-degree update for that. I believe there's it gets updated through ASI Studio. So I think if you go into your ASI Studio and you pull it up, you should be able to find what version it's on, and it should update it automatically through ASI Studio.
One more.
Sure.
The experimental all-star polar line,
Mm-hmm.
is that like production ready? It was a bit glitchy last night.
Actually, mine ran great last night, so it could just be where you were at. I really like I use the All Sky Polar line, even if I can see Polaris, because for one, it's automatic. I don't have to hit the button, and it kind of just goes. So it does its own thing, and then I'm ready to go. So I haven't noticed any problems or heard anything. It could have just been, maybe after a power cycle.
Or if it was too windy at the moment, maybe it just kind of,
Yeah.
it may have
Yeah,
been
it was
affecting
rough
it,
last night.
making it harder for it to, start complete solve and stuff, yeah.
And as long as it's not east or west, it doesn't matter anywhere north, south?
Well, you want to point it to north. You definitely point the scope towards, the best
Roughly.
you can to north, and then it'll tell you which way to move it. Or in the South Pole, but I don't think we have any South Pole people
I found
here.
it worked good with the AM5 ecosystem and not with the CEM25.
With the 725.
It worked great.
Hmm.
The AM3 and AM5. 75 to look great.
Yeah.
Did not with the CEM.
Okay.
I don't know why. Could have been
Yeah.
a class.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, I mean, if you get something like that, you can, like I said, just send us a support ticket, and like I said, if I can't get it to somebody, normally somebody would be like, oh yeah, okay, great, you know, and then we'll ask for logs, and then we'll be able to, you know, find out the answer and get it fixed. So a lot of times maybe somebody hasn't done it, and 725's been quite old now, so
It's not supported either.
yeah, so. I mean, I still have a 725 myself, so, but I haven't used it in,
It worked great on the 3 and 5.
yeah, AM3 and 5s work great, so.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Good.
All right, thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Thank you, Steve.
All right. So my name is Steve Ditmer. I'm not on the payroll with ZWO like these guys, although I was asked to be a defect support person a few years back because I do have experience with ZWO hardware since long ago. I've been working with the ASAR V1 on up. I use the 2600 as my daily photography camera and AM5 as my daily mount, so I'm very familiar with all their products. The software I'm going to talk to you about today is called AstroPixel Processor. It's a little bit lesser known in a lot of areas. I think people have seen a bajillion PixInsight presentations, so I thought I'd do something a little different. And also, this happens to be a software that was developed by a guy in the Netherlands. He's an astrophysicist, and his kind of initial, one of the core tenets of it was to try and make something that was a little easier for mosaics, and also to make it a little more obvious the steps you follow, because PixInsight is here's all the tools, figure it out yourself, figure out the order, figure out the processing pattern on your own, which is fine too, but you know, for a lot of people that's not as entry level friendly. And since C-stars are pretty common, something like this might be a little more accessible to you if you're not as familiar with how all those different processes work. There's also there's knobs and things you can turn to dial those things in, but they're not quite as intense as PixInsight can be. Just to give you a little information about who I am, so some of my photos, I do astrophotography. I've been doing that since about 2014. Primarily right now, I just became the president of our Mid-Hudson Astronomical Association in Mid-Hudson area of New York. It's a downstate region. I also am affiliated with the Adirondack Sky Center Observatory in Tupper Lake, New York, up in the Adirondacks. I do a astrophotography workshop there with them. I'm one of the instructors. And so it's kind of my progression of who I am, so you know I have some idea of what I'm talking about. ZWO is the one, like I said, that brought me here. I've attended a few different star parties with them this year at their tables, talking about their products with the customers, troubleshooting things with customers at NEAF and that kind of thing. So like I said, they're not affiliated with the software in any particular way. It's just was my choice to kind of talk about that. So there's a lot of different astrophotography softwares out there for pre and post processing that some of you may have seen before. A lot of us start out with the free versions of things. Things like Serial didn't exist when I started processing, so I started out with things like Deep Sky Stacker, which could handle basic activities okay, but when something went wrong, it was very difficult to figure out why it went wrong and how to fix it, and you know, how do you figure out which frame was the problem and that kind of thing. And then stuff like Maxim DL and those kind of things were super expensive and also very complex, and didn't seem like the right thing for me to start with as a new person. So we're going to talk, like I said, AstroPixel Processor. That's the logo for it. That's the website for it. Real basic. Back up front, people ask how much does it cost. It's about half the price of PixInsight for the full license. You can also get a year license for $60, or sorry, 71 US dollars, 60 pounds. But there's a 30-day free trial for anybody that wants to give it a shot. You can activate any of those licenses on up to 3 computers. So if you, like me, I process them on the go on my laptop, but I also have a desktop at home. You don't have to pay multiple times for that. And once it's activated online, you can use it offline after that. If they do major upgrades, they may have an upgrade fee in the future for an upgrade, but you still are able to use your previous version that doesn't expire. Yep. So core strengths, they've got a linear step-by-step kind of pattern for processing, which we'll walk through. They support multi-session and multi-filter processing, like multi-band processing. Mosaics was kind of a fundamental aptitude that they were trying to incorporate. And I find their frame analysis to be a little easier than using PixInsight's subframe analysis. And we'll go into that in some depth. So the pre-processing, for anybody that's kind of new to the area of astrophotography, Pre-processing, I kind of include calibration frames to model out the inherent inaccuracies of your gear, whether it be your glass or your sensor, etc. The registration, which is taking all those individual frames you had and making sure they're lined up properly. Stacking them all together, which reduces the noise floor and increases the signal level of all that combined data. And then drizzling, which is a little more of an advanced thing, but if you dither your frames, which means every certain number of frames, you let the mount kick off a few pixels one way or the other to make sure that it smooths out any sensor biases and things. If you do that and you're undersampled, you can drizzle. That'll upsample your image to get you a higher resolution final image. You can do all that in pre-processing and all of that in AstroPixel processor. So this is kind of when we started, like I said, this was the very basic how you would stack. I already kind of covered. It increases signal, it decreases noise. You may be familiar with this old open source software, just as an example. But you may also be familiar with PixInsight, which most people are now, with fast batch preprocessing and weighted batch preprocessing as your primary tools. So this kind of replaces those steps if you're using AstroPixel processor. And I actually use APP for all of my preprocessing, and then once I take it out of that, then I'll bring it into PixInsight for some final nuances and details. But I actually use this for all my preprocessing steps, especially if it's a mosaic. Yeah, a lot of people like the light pollution removal tool in here. I've heard that from multiple people. So that's usually the last step I'll do before I bring it into PixInsight and then do additional actions on it, like blur exterminator or something like that if I need it. So this is the general interface for it. It's a Java GUI, and those are the primary sections on here. So when you first open the application, it asks you for a working directory. That's just where it's going to save files that are being created along the way. If you make a master dark or something like that, that's the directory it's going to go to. The pre-processing steps are highlighted in orange there. There's basically 6 steps, and then there's a step 0 where you can make some configurations before you get into it. Whatever step tab you have enabled, that's the step settings underneath it. They're going to be shown to you for that particular step. So you can see the steps are load, calibrate, analyze the stars, register, normalize, and then integrate. So it makes it very clear what order to go through these steps, right? Because they're numbered. That makes it simple. But there's lots of power in the settings. And you can see if you can choose the multi-channel or filter processing or multi-session processing if you are processing data across multiple sessions or across multiple filters. And what that'll do is pop up a message that asks you, I'll show it in a minute, that asks you basically, okay, the light frames that you're loading, which session or which filter do these belong to? And it coordinates all that together. So you can integrate all together at once at the end, these different sessions of data. The bottom, once you've loaded files, they all show up in the file list, and they're color-coded as like a highlighted color to show you these are all your lights, these are your darks, these are your master darks, these are your HAs. And then it also includes all these columns that show the quality of that data. So as you go through the different steps, different quality metrics get filled out, such as the full width half max. Oh, sorry. Such as the full width half max of the star sizes or the registration error, that kind of stuff. And we'll use that in the end. We can use that to figure out which frames we want to reject. And then you have the preview window. If you're viewing an image, that's going to pop up there. There's a histogram that shows whatever image you're showing, how the histogram looks for that. You can make adjustments to the histogram stretches over here if you want to. I almost never really have to touch that because I do most of my final steps in PixInsight, but they are there if you're going to, you could go soup to nuts, do the entire processing in this application. So, like I said, you open it up, and it's going to ask you which working directory you want to use, or if you click on that button that shows the directory, you can set it from there. The first step here, you have an option for setting, like if you've got, it's going to figure out the pattern almost always on its own because that metadata is in the file that the camera saved, which Bayer matrix pattern it used. But if you need to, you can set it explicitly from there. The algorithm is an interesting one because if you're using a color camera, and you've got a multi-narrowband filter, like a ZWO Duo or something like that, you can tell it to treat that, and you can tell this is what I took, that image with, and you can have it extract, as part of it, extract those red pixels to be the HA and the, the blue pixels to be the oxygen 2 or something, that kind of thing. So you can have them automatically extract them into their channels when it loads those files. So this is the load tab. Like I said, if you select those options, if you select them and you don't actually have multi-sessions, it's not a big deal to just always put them in session 1 or just call them RGB. But it's one step less if you remember to uncheck those if you're just doing a single sessions processing. You put your name here for whatever the file, whatever the target is going to be, and that's just going to get concatenated into the file name when it saves things, M57, whatever. And then you just go down the list and you click light, you load your light frames in there. There's a section for the flats and the biases. And you can also, if you have masters already, like master darks, like a lot of people do from their dark libraries, you can just load the master dark as well. Once you load them all in there, so if this is where if you had multi-session checked, this is what's going to happen when you press load. It's going to say, okay, which session do you want to apply these files, this data to? And you can either give it a custom name if you want, if that helps you keep track of what session data you're working with, or you can just choose the arbitrary session 1, 2, and 3. If you give it a custom name, the next time you load more data, that custom name will show up as an option to select from. So it's, it's intuitive that way. And then similarly, if you've got multiple filters of session data, so you have a mono camera, you took reds, you took greens, you took lumens, you can load those in there and say these are the greens, these are the lumens, and that keeps track of all that as well. So this is kind of how the file list ends up looking once you've loaded stuff. In this case, I don't have any HA and that kind of stuff. They'd be highlighted kind of red if it's HA, for example. In this case, it's lights, a master flat, master dark, master bias. So they have different highlights to make it more obvious that those are those. But it also includes in the beginning title of it that, light, master flat, master dark. So it's easy to tell. We're going to dig more into this chart that shows up once you've actually analyzed these frames as one of the steps in the process that show you all sorts of information about the quality of each of those light frames. So the 3 steps that kind of get different metrics about the quality are going to be when you do the analyzing of the stars, the registration, and the normalization. Those are the particular fields that each of those end up filling in as a result. And you end up with these quality scores at the bottom that look like this. But more interesting than that is actually the chart that comes up, because this is harder to consume as a human, but a chart is much more easy for us to consume to see what the overall quality of these things are. And we will get to that once I get through the steps. So the second step is to run the calibration frames. It's pretty much, you can take the defaults in almost every case. If you want it, it'll create masters if you don't have them already. So if you haven't created master darks yet, and this is the first time loading them, you can use this to create those and save the masters into your working directory to store for later use to make it even faster, so you don't have to reprocess your darks every single time. So you can choose if you want to split or align channels over here, and if you have those X-trans CFA sensors, not many people do. It can handle demosaicing those. You can have it do an automatic light pollution removal. I usually don't. There's a separate tool for it at the end where you can manually do it. I find that personally preferential. Once you go to the step 3, it's going to be the analyze stars step. This is the first one where it actually has a button at the bottom that would actually do something. The other ones are just really setting up the configuration and loading the data. This one you can almost always take the defaults as well, unless you just wanted to skip the star analysis for any particular reason. Maybe you already know you sorted everything out and you're good with it. You don't want to bother analyzing them because you've already got your concise set of data. You could skip that step and save time. The only time you might change something here is if you're doing a mosaic, because a mosaic you're going to want to watch more than the default 500 stars, because now you've got a much bigger frame of field of view. So that's becomes handy then, because 500 spread out over 12 frames is not very many points to reference, right? So the registration is the next step, where it's going to actually align all of these frames, because even though you're tracking, nothing's perfect. You're always going to have just a slight shift of things, especially if you're doing it across multiple sessions, almost guaranteed to be a little bit off-centered slightly compared to the previous session, that kind of stuff. This has a mosaic setting as well if you're doing mosaics, because that's going to be a different kind of registration algorithm it has to use. And you may start to wonder at this point, how do I know when I need to change these settings? So this has really good mouse over support with tooltips. So if you mouse over one of these fields, the drop downs, that kind of thing, it pops up a tooltip that doesn't just give you a one-word explanation as to what each thing is. It tells you normal, mosaic, comment 1 star. So mosaic, it says if you have frames that don't overlap with your reference frame, you're going to need to choose mosaic mode. where you can choose between projective or calibrated projective models. The calibrated projective model is needed if the field of view is wider than 100 degrees. Like, it gives you a good explanation as to how to look at your data you have and pick which one makes the most sense for you. There is also comment stacking capability in this application. And that's on any one of these fields. You can mouse over and it gives you sometimes a very good sized documentation of write-up of what these options make sense for. And there is documentation in the forum online as well on the website. So step 5, you're almost at the end of it already, is normalization. It's going to correct for the scale or the field of view variations. If your focus was a little bit short or a little bit longer, say you're using SCT or something, that's really when you focus, you're literally changing your field of view, your focal length and your field of view. You could have different fields of view from different cameras or different telescopes that are part of the lights and the data that you're importing. So the normalization helps to put those all together and keep them on the same, scale, I guess is the right word. Again, mostly you can take the defaults through this, unless you're doing Mosaic that has specific options. Mouse over that, it'll explain why that is. And it's also going to neutralize the background across all those different inputs too, because if you take data one day versus another, it's very likely that your background washout from sky glow or from other environmental issues is going to be different from one session to another. So it tries to account for that and make them neutralized and smooth across everything. So it does have a note in there in the tooltips that mentions when you do a neutralized background, it does suppress some of the nebulosity. So when you're done, you want to do a calibration of the background to get that nebulosity back. Just a note. And then the last step is the integrate. So that's going to combine or stack all of the lights that have now been pre-configured based on all the previous steps you went through, and give you one final image at the end that's been calibrated, been normalized, been registered as a single image. So if you had already pruned out all of the bad frames in there, you don't need to necessarily reduce how many of those light frames you're going to include. But if you didn't go through and pick them all out individually, the bad ones, you might use that in order to say, I know there's some bad frames in there, we had some clouds come through, whatever. Just take 90% of the frames that I had uploaded and use those. It'll take the best quality-wise 90% of those frames and go with that. But if you went through ahead of time, which I'll show you kind of how to look at the charts, which I usually do, you can pick them out individually and make sure you got the one with the super bright star trails or the blinking airplane or something that you don't need because you've got 500 frames. Why even have one bad frame in there that, even if it would get algorithmically removed, could still inject some bad data that you don't want. So if you're going to do that, you can just leave it at 100.
Yeah, I always end up. Still, I'll remove all the ones I think are bad and still go with like.
And still, yeah, and you could make it even. You're not like the best visual aid of what's necessarily always wrong in every frame. You could still reduce it a little bit and say, and you take off your 10% that you think are the worst as well. Let the algorithms go a little deeper than you might. Most of these you can pretty much leave as default. So even though I'm showing you lots of different settings, a lot of them you can really just kind of almost skim over. The composition mode is basically, even if you're taking a single non-mosaic shot, all those frames are going to be just slightly shifted a little bit. And so when it's doing the registration and stacking everything, it's overlaying everything on top of itself. So you may have little edges where one frame stuck out over here and one frame stuck out a little bit at this angle. And so there's overlap, but it's not the full 100 frames that you put in that are overlapping that area. So you can have it, depending on which composition mode you choose, you could have it remove everything that's not entirely within where all the frames landed, or you can have it leave that outside stuff and let you crop it later yourself. I tend to like to crop it later myself because, just partly I'm just anal and want to make sure that I didn't lose a portion or, something that I might have wanted to keep that I felt it was too critical about. So I tend to go with full most of the time. The LNC, again, that's a similar thing. If it's collected over multiple nights, that's the local normalization correction, where it's going to try and blend the background values and things to make sure that when you put them on top of each other, the fact that it was a little more sky glow this night versus on this night, it's not going to let that override the good data. It's going to blend them, so you're not going to see a real obvious line where like the high sky glow night field of view ended, and then the low sky glow, darker background started. Right? It's going to blend these things together better. You don't necessarily need it if you're doing a single shot image, but for a mosaic it's particularly important because you've got different sky glow just going across the sky because of where the sky glow is sourced. It's never universally sourced. It's from one horizon or another, it's brighter, right? So that gradient is different all around the sky. So then you can do the drizzle if you're into it. It depends. Most people don't need to do it. If you're dithering, you have to be dithering. You have to be undersampled for drizzle to really be an improvement. I won't really go much into that. It's a little bit more of an advanced topic for people, especially if you're just starting out. But for anybody that's in the intermediary that may have heard of that or wonder, you can do that here. You can super sample your image and make it a higher pixel resolution in the final product. It can be good for printing larger photos and that kind of thing. Once you press integrate, it's going to go through and slam all that stuff together and give you that final single image. So going back to selecting frames, like I mentioned a few times before, whenever you run those tasks that, you can run the analyze the stars, the normalization, and the background neutralization separately, and each of those is going to fill in some of these metrics about the quality of the frames. Anytime you run those that are generating more metrics on the quality of the frames, it's going to pop up this chart of the star or the image qualities, and each time you run the next one with more data, it's going to add the new lines of that new quality data. So you can see here the green bar is basically the general overall quality of all of the metrics kind of combined, taken as a whole. But if you look at something like the orange with the little triangles, that's the full width half max quality level of that of each particular frame, and the frames are numbered from 0 over to however many you've added, right? So in this case, I just had 34 frames in the example. So you can see in the beginning, there was a lot of bad skies or clouds or whatever going on, and I was getting bad star shapes, which is the red, not very round stars. The full width half max was fairly poor over there. And then after about the 6th frame, everything got much nicer that night. So we ended up with a much more clear evening. So I would probably want to remove pretty much all of those in the beginning, right? And then it chose its favorite frame based on the overall quality and calls that the reference frame. It makes it clear which one that is as well. So you can, yep. Sorry, I'll try and speak up a little bit. So this is the subframe selector in PixInsight. You've got a lot of the similar data in terms of these metrics going across for each frame. The frames are vertical in this case, and the metrics are across the width. The problem is I can see in a graph form any of those metrics for an individual frame, and I can sort these data based on a column, but I can't see how each of those overlaps with each other. So if I'm going to look at this view to try and figure out what the better frames are, I'm going to end up having to remember oh, these were the really bad frames when it comes to the star quality, but they were good in this other metric, and the other frames that are completely different random file name number are the ones that had a better background quality, but their star quality wasn't great, right? And to try and do that from just the textual chart is very difficult. And if I want to change what I'm going to view, I can only view one thing at a time, not overlaid. So it just makes it really hard to look at it holistically across all of the metrics. So this is a different set of data than I looked at before, just so we're clear. But another nice thing you can do about this is each of those nodes is the frame, and you can select it with the mouse and get a menu where you can then either select or deselect that from your list of data that you'd imported. So if you had 100 frames in there and you say, all right, these are bad ones, I want to remove them, you can just deselect them, and it'll show up as being unhighlighted in that file list. And then any processing you do after that step is going to ignore those files. You could also remove it from the list entirely. It will no longer be part of that list. Or you can actually delete it off the file system entirely if you're committed to not liking that frame because it's just, maybe the mount got kicked or something and there's just stars all over dragging all over the place. You're never going to want that data, so you could just delete it right from here. Or if you don't like the reference frame that it shows automatically, you can reset the reference frame as with your preference as well. But then you can also, so when you unselect them, you can see it still shows up in the list, but it becomes a gray node instead of the color. So that makes it clear that those frames were not going to be included going forward. So in this case, I took out 4 or 5 just as an example on this right side and took out 1 over there. So now they're gray, even though they're still represented. So you could reselect them. You'd know they're there. If you made a mistake and accidentally unselected a good one, it's not completely out of the list and hard to get back. All right. So when you go on to the next step, so in the previous case, you can see I only had 4 different metrics down here because I'd done the analyze stars step only. And then I unselected some of the ones that had bad metrics there. I ran the next step, which was the registration. So that added a new registration metric. It's still, the ones that I had unselected just get bottomed out, so they're just out of the way at that point because it's not going to bother analyzing the registration in something you already unselected, so I'm not going to use that frame, right? So that's the only reason I just wanted to show it drops down like that. That's why it drops out of the way. But you can see that it added now the registration, the blue line at the top, showing the registration quality of the remaining frames that I am using. You can also then load the individual frames. So sometimes I've had issues very infrequently, but on occasion where you do the final integration and you're like, that doesn't look right. Like some data that I'm feeding it was creating a really wonky artifact at the end of the integration or something like that. I can go back through and find, you know, it's usually going to be in the lesser quality images. You can load those by just clicking on them and going to load frame. And not only can you load the individual file that you brought in, the actual input value, you know, image, but you can see what it looks like after it was calibrated. You can see what it looks like after it was registered and what it looks like after it was normalized. And then you can also even look at the star map of that particular image. So you can start to really dig down into what is weird about that particular file, if anything. So I had one where I was injecting I had 2 sessions that I was pulling in together. Didn't realize that I had loaded only flats from a single session. And those flats had different dust bunnies than the other session did. So it was creating some dust donut issues because it was subtracting dust donuts that weren't there on one set of the data. So by looking at the calibration frames, I could see, oh, yeah, as soon as I calibrated them, I was getting these artifacts. And now I knew, they gave me a hint as to what I did wrong, and I could go back and fix and address. So this, once you load a frame, this was an individual frame. It's heavily green because it's a one-shot color in this case. And you can see it's the raw file. It's just the original input file, and it's green because it was stretched, obviously. But from that drop-down, then you can select those other options, the other types, versions of that file that were created as you went through the steps. And if you click calibrated, it's going to bring up the calibrated version of that image. And again, when you mouse over, it shows you an explanation of what those different frames are, what that means, what the options are. This is what the star map looks like. So in this case, you could see this shows the minimum and the maximum full width half max of the stars on average in that particular frame. So you can see there's a little bit of a separation, meaning the min and the max. There's some variation. Some stars were kind of points, and some stars were a little more blown up. So there might have been some clouds or some haziness somewhere. By looking at the next frame, now you can see this particular image. Those are much closer together, so those are better stars across the board. And you can kind of tell, if you look real close, you can see that the stars are smaller dots, essentially, in that frame versus when I go back to the original. It's a little tough to see at this distance, but in a normal screen up front, you can tell that those are fatter stars and not as good of a quality of an image. The focus was probably off. Maybe the temperature had changed over time and I needed to refocus, something like that. So then, if you didn't, if you chose the mode of doing the full composition mode where it's not going to automatically crop, you can see that when I had this, it's not truly a mosaic, but it was multi-images from different locations. So they're not overlapping perfectly over each other. And that's why you end up with these black areas, because there was no image data in those sections. And if you look down here, you can see it's kind of darker from here up than it is from there down, just along this bottom edge. It might be hard to see, but it's there. That's because these overlapped many more frames, but I had a few frames that were down further, covering that lower data. That just wasn't cropped out because I told it not to crop anything and I'll take care of the cropping later. So in this case, I knew I had an odd shape of collection of images, not just a rectangle. So I was going to figure out how I want to crop that later, after the fact. I didn't want it to do it for me because I would probably end up just picking, a rectangle that would lose a lot more of reasonably good data over here because it's not just a rectangle shape. And then the last thing I'll show you here is just the, once you go past step 6, there's a tools tab. And so there are some options for, actually they were visible in the last one, I think. So there are some options for correcting vignetting, removing light pollution, calibrating background, that kind of stuff. So if you, in this case, like I said, the calibrating of the light pollution is the one thing I do on here still. It pops open like this. It works very similar to PixInsight, where you draw 5 small boxes at least, or you can draw more, in areas that should be just sky, no stars, and that uses those as reference points for what's just background. And when you hit recalculate, it applies that model to remove the background sky noise, vignette, or not, light pollution from the image, and then you just hit OK and save it. And you move on from there. So this is what, if you zoom in, you can pinch in to zoom and find little areas that are just sky to use as a reference. So there you go. So it's a soup to nuts speed run through, but hopefully you can kind of see that it's built with mosaics in mind. You don't have to go find randomly named or seemingly randomly named processes from the process toolbar and figure out which one to do in what order. It puts them in order for you. It really kind of helps encapsulate the process as you go, and makes it really easy to interrogate the individual frames for your preference for any bad ones or any good ones that way. So, any questions? I fire hosed you with lots of information. In the back, sorry, in the back there. I find it to be, on average, it's faster or as fast. The mosaic mode obviously can vary. The one thing I'll say about mosaic mode, it's better to process each of the sections and then throw them together as a mosaic than it is to just throw all the light frames in together and have it mosaic at the same time that it's integrating everything fresh. There's an order of difference in how fast it is doing that, but I find it to be at least the same or very similar to what I get out of PixInsight generally for my regular integration standard images. So it does have an OpenGL capability to accelerate with that. It doesn't use CUDA like PixInsight does, but not everything in PixInsight uses CUDA either. So, yeah. So you.
The more advanced specialty processing things that you can get, I think it's RCS or something like that, work in PixInsight. Do any of those things work in After PixInsight?
No, he doesn't make any plugins for AstroPixel Processor. He only makes the Blur Exterminator and that kind of stuff. Yeah, so that's why I tend to stop at about that point and then load it up in PixInsight, and then I'll run like the Blur Exterminator, maybe some noise extermination. I tend to use both. You can, like I said, you could go through, and it does have those other tools for noise reduction and other stuff. You can do it completely within this platform. And if you're not somebody that has paid the extra 150, 200, whatever it is for those Blur Exterminator and that kind of stuff, you probably are perfectly fine in this because you didn't put out the extra money for that.
It's a really good supplement tool to PixInsight.
Yeah.
It does things better in some ways than PixInsight does. So it shines in certain things, like you said, the light pollution removal is great for me. There's also a one-button click in the early on, and then you can actually, if it's still a little bit bad, you can go in and select your boxes and remove it again.
Right.
So, but it is light waves ahead of PixInsight for that. So that's why I jump around.
It's like any tool. There's no master of all aspects, and so this is where I just find the pre-integration steps to be easier here and simpler and work well.
If you're trying to adjust the back focus distance on the flattener, is there anything in the...
It doesn't have like the zoom in on the 4 corners. Yeah, it doesn't have that tool. Yeah. I think you can get that in SharpCap, I think, for free. Has that tool, I believe. Yeah. So this is kind of like an intermediary between your freeware configuration and between the full-blown, I bought all the PixInsight and all the AI, $1,000 package.
A lot of people are trying to use Zero.
Yeah, I have nothing against Zero. I used it a little bit, but I'm just already adept at PixInsight when it comes to that level, like that other processing that I do, so I haven't switched over to it yet, or haven't found it to be better for me yet. And arbitrarily, with no real metric-driven proof on it, what I've seen for people that have experience in both, they seem to always come out just a little bit nicer in PixInsight than they do in Serial. So, and I've already got the license for PixInsight, so I don't really have an personal incentive to dig into Serial, but I do know a lot of people that do like it. So, yeah. So.
Drive yourself crazy with all this.
Oh, I know. Yeah. So, any other questions before we hang it up? Okay. All right. Thank you guys. Appreciate your time.